Ryan, good to see you. Could you introduce yourself and your business?
Absolutely. Great to see you too. Yeah, absolutely. So Ryan Cimo, I'm located here in Buffalo, New York. Most people think it's close to the city. It's about 7 hour drive,
Okay.
but here in Buffalo. And I founded a company in 2023 called Fractional, and we supply compliance and risk leadership to anything from bootstrapped fintechs and crypto companies all the way up through regional banks, community banks, private equity firms. And what we really try to do is to provide them what is decades of leadership experience for fractions of the cost, but also greater flexibility. So typically, you would have, let's say, a fintech, whether they're a seed round or whether they're a Series A or Series B, they may not be at a point yet where they need full time support, but they need to have really qualified folks who've been there, done that. And so what we're able to do is provide them that leadership, and it can go as low as a few hours a month, all the way up to and including many hours a month on a retained basis. So that's really what we do. We also do one-off type things like independent audit, risk assessments,
Mhm.
SOC 2 compliance, where they're more project-based things versus an embedded part of their team. So we've been at this now for going on year three, and
Nice.
we've supported dozens of clients, and not only here in North America, but obviously throughout the globe as well, everywhere from Africa to Latin America to Asia to Canada, well, North America to South America, and beyond. So it's been quite a ride so far. My background, I spent 26 years in commercial banking.
Okay.
So the first half of which was in sales, which I know we'll talk a little bit about that piece of it. But at a bank called M&T Bank, which when I joined it was a relatively small bank. It's now almost nearly top 10 here in the U.S. in
Mm.
terms of its size. And so from sales to offshoring, managing our offshoring program, parts of it, all the way up to and including anti-money laundering compliance. And that's how this company Fractional was born.
Okay. Okay. Very cool. So I think it's interesting because a lot of the time, from my experiences, sometimes there's a bit of a disconnect between the sales and the compliance teams within businesses. So I think your experience then means that you're not only coming in from the compliance side, but also the commercial side of looking at actually what is the business set out to do. They're there to grow and everything like that, which
That's that's right. Yeah, and it's interesting because most people, and this is largely true. Most compliance people aren't salespeople,
mm,
um, and most salespeople don't become compliance people.
yeah,
So I've been fortunate enough to have this really unique blend of both. And as I started the company, I was personally doing some of the work in terms of being the chief compliance officer or chief risk officer or BSA officer for these companies. I've transitioned away from that largely into just trying to grow the business. So you have a lot of independent compliance professionals in the industry who don't have websites, don't want to sell, don't
yeah,
want to go to trade shows, but they're highly capable people. And so the value prop that I offer with the team that I've got is I'll do all of that. And in return, I'll find those opportunities to bring them in, and match that together. So that's really what I've been able to do. I'm better at selling than I am at compliance in some regards. So it made more sense for me to make sure I spent my time focusing on that piece of it.
nice. Okay, okay. So your day to day is growing the business, finding new ways to get clients, speaking to potential clients, getting that
Yeah.
the business in, right?
It is. I still have two clients that I actively am their chief compliance officer for, and
Okay.
and they don't need as much high touch, let's say, that maybe some would. So if somebody came come to me and say, "Hey, by the way, I need 40 hours a month," that's something where I'd bring one of my teammates in to handle that. If it's something where it's jumping on an investor call, it's really just trying to give them advice on certain pieces of it, but be their name CCO.
Mm.
Those are two areas that I still continue to do on a routine basis, both on the typically on the crypto side as well as on the I'll call it the cross border payments side.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting. So, what have you found when selling compliance services versus when you're selling like fintech or financial tech services? Have
Yeah.
you found any differences, any similarities?
Well, so typically, I would just say that from a it's less so about like fintech and compliance services. It's really compliance services is the umbrella over top of fintech and crypto, and
Mm.
private equity, and banks. What I would say is that I've seen a shift in the last 6 months specifically. So if I go back to 2023 when started this, you had fintechs that were crypto really wasn't a thing. It was a thing, obviously, but it wasn't as mainstream as it's becoming.
Mm.
So most of the early clients were fintech companies who spun up as like neobanks, and they were trying to fill a vertical niche within the industry. What's happened in the last 6 months, obviously, as you know, I know you're in the UK, but we've had a change of administration here. And so it's been more crypto friendly. So now most of the things that are coming across and most of the things that I'm talking to people about are stablecoin companies, companies that are trying to make the flow of funds cross border easier and less expensive and
Mm.
less friction. So that's become hugely important. And then crypto, stable coins are effectively in the crypto space, but the crypto piece of this has really become quite interesting and quite rapid in terms of its adoption. So we're selling compliance services into those companies.
Mm.
Because they're spinning up so quickly, and if they don't get their compliance right, they may not reach a seed round of investment, certainly not a Series A round. And the banks that are providing them the on and off ramps for them to move money aren't going to do that unless they know that they've got a compliance program. So what I'm effectively, selling, if you will, is let us come in, and if you've got nothing, let us build your program for you. And if you have something that you've kind of spun up, let us take a look at what that is and let's make it better, so that you're somewhat beyond reproach when it comes to your bank partners and investors wanting to make sure that you're fairly well buttoned up.
Okay. So it's so you've adjusted the target market, kind of the ideal
Yeah.
customer profile. It's going with the trends. And is there many other people in the same space with the same expertise as you?
So interesting. Good question. I would say there are. What we do isn't necessarily unique in and of itself. Um, what is different? There's probably 3 or 4 companies that effectively do what we do, each with a little bit of a different twist in terms of how they approach it. Maybe the type of clients they're willing to bring on to support. So that's certainly that. But what is happening is there are a lot of independent professionals, as I mentioned before, that are in this space.
Mm.
It's hard for them to scale, right? So you can only do so much as an individual, and the next thing you know, you may only be able to take on 2 or 3 clients, and then you may have 4, 5, or 6 who come down the line, and you can't support them.
Yeah.
So we've created a model where we provide opportunities for those types of individuals who are part of the team to be able to effectively refer back in to the company, to Fractional, and to be able to be a part of the compensation structure, as those things maybe get moved around to some other professional on the team who might be able to handle the work for them. So I have seen there's more and more individual players in what we do than there are, let's say, companies that are creating the opportunities that we're doing here at Fractional.
Nice. Okay, that makes sense. Yeah, and I
Yeah.
think it's I've definitely seen it in the UK in the compliance space where again these individual consultants, they will hit the ceiling, the cap of how much they can do, and hit
That's right.
level. So okay, that makes sense. How are you unlocking actually getting these clients? Because this is another challenge. So for the consultants, maybe they are signing clients, or maybe they're not getting to that ceiling point because they're not signing enough clients. So what's your insight on that regard?
Yeah. So when I started this, I mean, it's evolved certainly. I mean, I think anytime you start something, you have to be nimble and you have to adjust. I mean, hell, I actually renamed the company and completely rebranded it by month 3 because I thought that what it was before just wasn't matching up with the type of clients I was, getting and things of that sort. It was called Leopard Hill Strategies. I had gone to a college where the mascot was a leopard, and I thought, oh well, let me, and it was on College Hill, so I thought, well, let me make it Leopard Hill. But it was too staunchy and weird, and I thought, you know what? Let me do something that's actually more aligned with the types of companies and places where I'm finding the opportunities. Yeah. But in addition to that, though, where we find the opportunities is kind of multiple places. I was fortunate over 26 years to have a pretty large network.
Mm-hmm.
on LinkedIn is a good example, fairly large network on LinkedIn. And so obviously opportunities come from that, from
Yeah.
referrals and things. We've also created, strategic partnerships with, let's say, reg tech firms in this space. So whether it's like a GRC system or whether it's a transaction monitoring system, companies that create those, where they're in, or even, in some cases, staff augmentation providers in the risk space, where they just maybe do transactional type stuff at the analyst level, but they have a client who maybe needs a fractional chief compliance officer. So I've been able to create agreements with those reg tech companies. When they get approached about needing something from a client of theirs, we're able to talk to them on their behalf and try to get them situated with what they need. So it's really a combination of that. We've got repeat business, obviously, from existing clients, or if we have an existing client today that started out as a card processor 2 years ago, and they've completely switched over to stablecoins. So, so they maybe went dormant for 6 months, and then next thing you know, you're getting a phone call. Hey, by the way, we're creating a stablecoin company. We need some compliance work. So it's existing network. It's repeat buyer, if you will, but maybe who've pivoted. And then it's, strategic partnerships with companies that are maybe fishing in the same pond, but for different reasons. And so we're able to kind of mesh those together.
Yeah. Okay. That makes sense. And how would you say that relates to maybe what you see from your clients' growth? So you just spoke then about how some clients are making pivots and changes about what they're doing. Like, is that because there's too much supply? Are they struggling in creating demand? What's your perspective on that? Okay, I've made a quick video to explain what we do as a business, and I wanted to let you know because you probably got the burning question of who's this guy? Why is he asking these questions? What does he know about sales? Well, I put it all in the video, so click on it. It's in the description and in the comments, and I'll let you get back to the podcast now.
Yeah, I think it's two things. I think, there's that old saying, if you're into hockey, Wayne Gretzky, one of the greats, said you skate to where the puck is going. And I think you have a lot of these founders who are very bright, very intelligent, can pivot pretty quickly, who kind of see where the puck is going. And where the puck's going is this whole, I'll call it cross-border payment space, which now is being, stable coins are becoming the underpin of that.
Yeah.
And so that's a pure volume game. So they're taking a couple bips off of whatever's moving. So if you can get yourself quickly to moving money and taking some pieces of that, you can pay back investors pretty quickly. So I think that's a big thing, is they see where the industry is going. That's one thing. I also think that the investors, the folks who are willing to write the checks, are seeing the very same thing. So I think so for example, I had a client maybe 2 years ago who was basically trying to become a Chime. Chime is they're basically a consumer-based fintech. They're very difficult to do, and it's a volume game as well, but it can be a loss leader. So you had people chasing that and saying, I'm going to be the next Chime. Well, that's very, very hard to do, super expensive marketing spend. And then, so that sort of died off because the investor community was like, we don't think there's a space for that anymore. Everything's shifted. So that's really what's going on in the industry right now, particularly on the fintech side. And even companies that, let's say, were crypto based, that they had a crypto underpinning, even they're shifting a little bit too, to get to more of the mainstream crypto side of the world. Maybe they were playing in some sort of decentralized, blockchain type of environment. Kind of hard to play in that space, but they still want to stay in the crypto space. They're kind of moving into this, I'll call it, stablecoin type environment. So that's really what's happening.
Yeah, fine. And so that's where you said with your analogy where the puck's going. Yep. What about after the next pass? So that's what people are noticing now. What are you predicting is the next pass?
It's a good question. I think you're going to see, from the perspective of what we do, let's call it, just kind of is you're going to have banks, let's call it smaller banks under 10 billion in assets here in the US, who, let's say, 4 or 5 years ago got into the fintech sponsorship business. All these fintechs that spun up needed a sponsor bank
Yeah.
to underpin them. And then you started to see here in the U.S. specifically those banks getting out of that space in the last 2 or 3 years because the regulatory environment was such that it was almost a death wish in some cases to get involved in it.
Yeah.
So now you've got stablecoin companies spinning up. You've got JP Morgan Chase getting involved in the stablecoin business. I think it's almost a green light to a lot of these smaller banks that say, well, hey, let's get involved in this. Let's see if we can create partnerships and make some money. They may not have the expertise, though, that's going to be required from a compliance perspective because it's very different than just traditional finance and traditional compliance. So they may lean on companies like Fractional to say, hey, we want to get involved in this space. We're going to need you guys for 6 months to help us build out the right controls that are more crypto based than they are just standard PayPal, Venmo type of money movement or Zelle. And I think that's what's going to happen in the compliance consulting space. I think more broadly, just in the environment that you're going to see, I just think you're going to see deeper and deeper adoption of crypto specifically. That you're going to go buy a coffee and you're going to just tap, and it's going to be coming out of your crypto wallet. That happens today, but not to the extent that I think it's going to happen. So I just think the payments space in general is going to be so upended by this shift, and the compliance around payments is really stringent. That's what I think is going to happen. And then on top of that, I think you're just going to have the normal everyday banks getting themselves in a little bit of hot water on the anti-money laundering side of the house, where you're always going to need some sort of BSA. Over in the UK, it's MLROs, money laundering reporting officers. You're going to see that continue to be a need. And not to deviate too much, but a lot of these companies sometimes maybe had a full-time person, and there's a lot that goes with that. You got benefits, you've got equipment, you've got all these things. What we're able to do is provide them that very same expertise, in some cases better, for a fraction of the cost and greater flexibility. And also, too, them to have an opportunity to kick the tires on the type of person that they may want to hire full time.
Yeah.
So we get them all that. Hopefully that answers your question, though.
Yeah. That was good. So I think with the compliance teams internally specifically, so you think that they could potentially lean out quite a bit, and then we're going to see, because it's always, I've always seen it as, especially in the fintech spaces, once they build out the compliance team, that it's just an ever growing spend. It just continues growing, and it's you get one person in, and then they want someone else, and then it's separates.
Yep.
So you think that we're going to start seeing a reverse on that now?
Well, I think you're going to start to see a need for more specific compliance expertise around a certain piece of things. So you could bring somebody in as a chief compliance officer who's done that at a bank or whatever the case is, and they're going to be just fine. If you're a fintech, though, and you're going at, like, for example, if you're a fintech and you're going after a very specific cross-border payments from, let's say, US to Africa. Africa has a very unique and challenging environment for compliance vis-a-vis cross-border payments. You have to have some knowledge of how to operate in each of the various parts of Africa because they're different. Somewhat similar here. In the US, you have to have money transmitter licenses in each state, and states are different and things of that sort. But Africa is very different. So let's say you're a US-based bank who is going to onboard a US-based fintech whose primary value prop is, we're going to move money from here to Africa. We're going to do this through. I think most banks, certainly, and maybe even most fintechs that maybe aren't compliance heavy, they're going to need somebody who's had that experience. And so I think that's more what you're going to see. It's going to be less about the generalist, because you can find generalists anywhere. It's going to be more about, have you done this before? Have you operated, not physically per se in Africa, but do you know the rules and regs? Do you understand the challenges that exist? I think that's what you're going to see.
Okay. Yeah. Interesting. Yeah. I think I agree. I think it will be, because you're always going to want the people in-house that maybe are doing them like more basic admin
Right.
tasks around compliance, right?
Yep.
But yeah,
That's
no,
right.
I agree. So okay, how are you positioning yourself, and what are you doing to make sure you maximize this opportunity coming for your business?
Yeah. Well, we've been fortunate that we've got existing clients today that we've been with since the start who are playing in the very spaces I just mentioned.
Yeah.
And so, I can go back to some of our earliest clients. These were like the early stablecoin companies that were spinning up, not the circles and the big ones. I'm not talking about, that, but FinTechs who maybe got seeded with $3 million a year and a half ago. And we've been working with them on that. And then all of a sudden, because the floodgates opened on stablecoins, hate to keep using that, but it's the most prevalent at this point.
Yeah.
We've been able to, so we were fortunate to be in early on some of those things. We've got clients where their founders spun off from some of the bigger stablecoin payments providers. And we've been fortunate to be there at the ground floor, helping them build their program. And then, I mentioned Africa before, because that is probably going to be one of the bigger pieces of fintech, stablecoins, cross-border. It's going to be Africa, Latin America. Again, we've been fortunate to be on the ground floor of some of the biggest ones that are out there today, and continue to have them as clients. All that's going to do is show that, if I'm a fintech today, or if I'm a fintech today, and I decide that I want to get into the cross-border payments or the FX world,
Mm-hmm.
and I go and I say, okay, who are the top few players? And I see XYZ company. And then I go to Fractional's website and I see that the logo. Oh, wow, they work with them. Again, that we're just fortunate. And I think, obviously we do good work, but we're fortunate to have been early enough in those for us to be, part of that. We're also fairly early in the payment space when it comes to gaming with crypto, which, a year ago would have been like blasphemy. Like, who's going to get involved in that? But we've been fortunate to be involved in that too. And so that's been great too.
Nice. Okay. Yeah. Looking forward to seeing how, because you're positioned so strongly, I think it will be interesting to keep tabs and check back in a year's time and see how things have progressed. So, Ryan, where should people go if they are interested in having a conversation, hearing about your services and your solutions?
Yeah, appreciate that. Yeah, you can visit us at Fractional. You can see it back here, .co with an X, fractional.co with an X. So we're there. We're just starting a new blog series, which we're putting out content on a weekly basis on LinkedIn. We have a LinkedIn page as well. So any one of those places. I also, and this is the first I've been on the other side of a podcast. I host my own podcast, which you can see there. We talk to a lot of industry leaders. We've done things with folks who know wine. We go around the board, but it's more about entrepreneurship.
Yeah.
So you can find us there. But yeah, that's the primary place where you can find us, certainly.
Perfect. All right, Ryan.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for coming on. And yeah,
Appreciate it. I appreciate that very much. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.